David, a humble shepherd boy, became one of the greatest kings in biblical history, but his journey was filled with extraordinary triumphs and devastating failures that make his story universally relatable, even thousands of years later. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, I'll guide you through the complete arc of King David's remarkable life, from his unlikely victory over Goliath, to his passionate psalms, his forbidden love for Bathsheba, his complex legacy as Israel's most beloved king, and ultimately, as the ancestor of Jesus Christ. But before we dive in, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button for more content like this. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. So, without further ado, let's begin, shall we? Prologue. The threads of destiny long ago, in a land of hills and valleys, where morning dew clung to olive branches and evening stars watched over sleeping flocks, there lived a people chosen for a special purpose. This ancient land of Israel, nestled between mighty empires and crossed by dusty caravan routes, held the story of a shepherd boy who would become king. Before our tale begins, Israel had no kings. For generations after settling in the Promised Land, the people were guided by judges, wise men and women raised up in times of need. These judges weren't rulers in the way we think of kings and queens. They settled disputes, led armies when enemies threatened, and reminded the people of their covenant with God. This was a simpler time, when each family tended their own plot of land, harvested their own grain, and pressed their own olive oil. Villages, nestled on hillsides, were bound together by kinship and faith, celebrating festivals that marked the turning of seasons and remembered their journey from slavery to freedom. But the world was changing around them. Egypt to the south and Mesopotamia to the east had powerful kings. Closer still, the seafaring Philistines built cities along the coast with iron weapons and organized armies. The Canaanites, Moabites, and Ammonites all had kings to lead them, while Israel followed the rhythm of a different drum. As evening shadows grew longer across the hills of Judah, an old order was fading. The time of judges was drawing to a close, and the threads of countless lives were being woven together into a tapestry none could fully see. Among these threads, one would shine with particular brightness: the life of a boy named David. In those days, hearts grew restless. "Give us a king," the people began to murmur. Like all the other nations, they longed for someone to lead them into battle, to stand before them as a symbol of unity and strength. This desire would set in motion events that would change their world forever. Our story is one of faith, tested in life's valleys and strengthened on its mountain tops. It tells of power gained and power misused, of betrayal's bitter taste and redemption's sweet mercy. Through it all runs a golden thread, the presence of something greater than human strength or wisdom. As stars appear in the evening sky, imagine yourself there, smelling the wild thyme crushed underfoot, hearing distant sheep bells as flocks settle for the night, feeling the cooling breeze after a warm day. This is where our story begins, in the quiet moments between day and night, between one age and another. Listen now to the tale of David, shepherd boy, musician, warrior, fugitive, king, sinner, and psalmist. His life, with all its light and shadow, reveals truths that echo through time, about what it means to be truly human, truly flawed, and truly loved, despite it all. Let these ancient words carry you like a gentle stream, flowing from long ago yet speaking still to hearts that listen as you drift with this timeless story. May you find rest in its familiar rhythms and peace in its enduring hope. In the hill country of Ephraim lived a man named Elkanah with his 2 wives, Peninnah and Hannah. While Peninnah had children, Hannah remained childless, her heart heavy with longing. Each year the family would journey to Shiloh to worship at the sanctuary where the Ark of the Covenant rested. Hannah's prayers rose like evening incense, whispered so fervently that Eli the priest thought she was drunk. With lips moving but voice silent, she made a vow, "Lord, if you give me a son, I will give him back to you for all the days of his life." Eli, understanding at last, blessed her, "Go in peace, and may God grant what you have asked." In time, Hannah cradled a son in her arms. She named him Samuel, which means heard by God. True to her promise, when the boy was weaned, she brought him to Shiloh. "For this child I prayed," she told Eli, "and now I give him to the Lord for as long as he lives." Young Samuel grew up in the sanctuary's shadow, helping Eli with sacred duties. The boy slept near the ark, tending the lamps that shouldn't go out before morning. One night, as stars wheeled overhead and oil lamps burned low, Samuel heard a voice calling his name. Thinking Eli needed him, the boy hurried to the old priest's side. "Here I am, for you called me," Samuel said. Eli, roused from sleep, sent him back to bed. 3 times this happened until Eli realized who was calling. "Go and lie down," he told Samuel. "If he calls again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" When the voice came again, Samuel answered as instructed. That night, God revealed to the boy what would happen to Eli's family because his sons had dishonored the sacred offerings. Morning came, and Samuel, afraid to tell Eli what he had heard, went about his duties until the priest insisted on hearing everything. As Samuel grew older, his words proved trustworthy. From Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, people recognized him as a prophet whose messages came true. While neighboring peoples worshipped gods of wood and stone, Samuel reminded Israel of their covenant with the living God who had brought them out of Egypt. These were troubled times. The Philistines pressed in from coastal cities with chariots and organized armies. In one devastating battle, the Ark of the Covenant was captured and Eli's sons were killed. When news reached the elderly priest, he fell backward from his seat, broke his neck and died. For 20 years Samuel guided Israel through this dark period. He traveled a circuit between Bethel, Gilgal and Mizpah, settling disputes and teaching God's ways. Under his leadership, the people turned away from foreign gods and recommitted themselves to the covenant. When the Philistines gathered for another attack, Samuel offered sacrifices and prayed for protection. As battle joined, thunder rolled across the sky, throwing the enemy into such confusion that Israel won a decisive victory. Samuel set up a stone memorial named Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far has the Lord helped us." Peace settled over the land during Samuel's lifetime. Yet as his hair grew white and his steps slower, trouble brewed again, not from outside enemies but from within. Samuel appointed his sons Joel and Abijah as judges in Beersheba. Unlike their father, they accepted bribes and twisted justice for personal gain. The elders of Israel gathered at Ramah, where Samuel lived. Their request fell heavy on the aging prophet's ears. "You are old and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us such as all the other nations have." Samuel was deeply troubled. Israel was meant to be different, with God as their true king. He prayed for guidance, his weathered hands raised in the gathering dusk. The answer came clear as stars appearing in the evening sky. "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. They have not rejected you, but they have rejected me as their king." Morning light found Samuel addressing the elders again. He warned them what having a king would mean. Sons taken for the army, daughters for the palace, fields and vineyards claimed for royal favorites, taxes that would feel like bondage. Still the people insisted, "We want a king to lead us and fight our battles." As shadows lengthened across the hills of Israel, an era was ending. The time of judges, those raised up for specific needs,
was giving way to something new. Samuel, the bridge between these ages, would anoint Israel's first king, even as his heart held on to the vision of what might have been.
In the territory of Benjamin lived a man named Kish, wealthy and respected among his tribe. His son Saul stood head and shoulders above other men, handsome, strong, and imposing. Yet destiny found him on a humble errand, searching for his father's lost donkeys. After 3 days of fruitless searching, Saul and his servant approached the town where Samuel was staying. "Let's ask the seer," suggested the servant, offering the last quarter shekel of silver as payment for the prophet's help. As they climbed toward the town gate, they met women coming to draw water who directed them to the high place where Samuel would bless the sacrifice. What Saul didn't know was that the day before God had whispered to Samuel, "About this time tomorrow, I will send you a man from Benjamin, anoint him leader over my people Israel." Now seeing the tall young man approaching, Samuel heard the inner voice again. "This is the one." Before Saul could even ask about missing donkeys, Samuel invited him to eat in the place of honor at the feast, where a special portion had been set aside, as if expecting him. Confused but pleased, Saul accepted. "Am I not a Benjamite from the smallest tribe? Why such honor?" he wondered. As evening fell, they talked on the rooftop under a canopy of stars. What passed between them, the scriptures don't say, but morning found Samuel walking Saul to the edge of town. Sending the servant ahead, Samuel took a flask of olive oil and poured it over Saul's head. "The Lord has anointed you ruler over his inheritance," he declared. To confirm this unexpected calling, Samuel gave Saul 3 signs that would happen on his journey home: an encounter near Rachel's tomb, an offer of bread at the great tree of Tabor, and a group of prophets coming down from the high place. "The Spirit of the Lord will come powerfully upon you," Samuel said. "You will prophesy and be changed into a different person." Everything happened just as Samuel predicted. When Saul met the prophets, the Spirit came upon him, and he began to prophesy with them. People who knew him were astonished. "Is Saul also among the prophets?" The question became a saying in Israel. Samuel called the people to Mizpah to present their new king. Using the sacred lots, he narrowed down tribe by tribe, clan by clan, until Saul was selected. But when they looked for him, Saul was nowhere to be found. He had hidden himself among the baggage, perhaps overwhelmed by the weight of what was happening. Once found and brought forward, Saul's impressive height caused many to shout, "Long live the king!" Samuel explained the rights and duties of kingship, writing them on a scroll placed before the ark. Yet, not everyone celebrated. Some troublemakers muttered, "How can this man save us?" Saul, showing wisdom beyond his years, held his peace. The new king's first test came quickly. Nahash the Ammonite besieged Jabesh Gilead, offering surrender terms that included gouging out the right eye of every man. When messengers brought this news to Gibeah, Saul was returning from the fields behind his oxen, still living as a farmer, despite his anointing. Hearing the people's distress, the Spirit of God came powerfully upon Saul. He cut a pair of oxen into pieces and sent them throughout Israel with this warning: "This is what will be done to the oxen of anyone who does not follow Saul and Samuel." Fear of the Lord fell on the people, and they turned out as one. Gathering a massive force, Saul divided them into 3 groups and attacked the Ammonite camp before dawn. By midday, the enemy was scattered so completely that no 2 soldiers remained together. This decisive victory silenced those who had doubted Saul's ability to lead. At Gilgal, amid celebration and sacrifice, Samuel formally installed Saul as king. "Now, here is the king you have chosen," Samuel told the people. To demonstrate that this change came with heaven's approval, Samuel called on God to send thunder and rain during the dry harvest season. When dark clouds gathered and rain poured down, the people trembled, realizing the significance of what they had done. "Do not be afraid," Samuel assured them. "Serve the Lord faithfully with all your heart. Do not turn away to worthless idols that cannot rescue you. For the sake of his great name, the Lord will not reject his people." So began the reign of Saul, son of Kish, Israel's first king. The simple man who had searched for lost donkeys now led a nation. Early success and the Spirit's power marked these beginning days, like sunrise promising a bright day ahead. Yet shadows lurked beyond the horizon, unseen but approaching. The fall of Saul, disobedience and rejection. For 2 years, Saul ruled Israel with strength and purpose. The Philistine threat remained constant along the western borders, their outposts dotting the highlands. Iron weapons gave them advantage, and they controlled the trade routes, forbidding blacksmiths among the Hebrews, lest they forge weapons of war. Saul built a standing army with his son Jonathan as chief commander. Brave and true-hearted, Jonathan attacked a Philistine outpost at Geba, stirring the hornet's nest. In response, the Philistines gathered a massive force, 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and foot soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. Fear gripped the Israelites. Many hid in caves and thickets. Some fled across the Jordan River. Those who remained with Saul at Gilgal trembled as they waited for Samuel to arrive and offer sacrifices before battle. 7 days passed the appointed time, but Samuel hadn't come. Watching his army dwindle as men slipped away, Saul made a fateful choice. Though not a priest, he offered the burnt offering himself. Just as the flames consumed the sacrifice, Samuel arrived, his face clouded with disappointment. "What have you done?" the prophet asked. Saul explained his reasoning: the army scattering, the Philistines gathering at Michmash, the fear that battle would begin before seeking God's favor. His words made earthly sense but missed a deeper truth. Samuel's response fell like stones. "You have acted foolishly. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. The Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time, but now your kingdom will not endure." Despite this rebuke, God granted victory through Jonathan's courage and faith. With just his armor-bearer, the young prince climbed the cliffs to a Philistine outpost, saying, "Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." 20 enemy soldiers fell before them, creating panic in the Philistine camp that spread like wildfire. Seeing the enemy in disarray, Saul led his men into battle. Israelites who had hidden now joined the fight. Victory came, but was tarnished by Saul's rash oath that no one should eat until evening. Unknowing, Jonathan tasted honey from a wild hive, bringing another crisis of Saul's making. This pattern continued through the years, victories granted despite Saul's missteps, the kingdom secured even as cracks appeared in its foundation. Saul fought against Moab, Ammon, Edom, and the kings of Zobah, pushing back Israel's enemies on every side. His family grew sons Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchishua, daughters Merab and Michal, his wife Ahinoam, watching over their household. Then came the Amalekites, desert raiders, who had attacked Israel during their wilderness journey generations before. Through Samuel, God commanded Saul to completely destroy this people and all their possessions, a harsh judgment by modern standards, yet presented as divine justice for ancient wrongs. Saul gathered his army and defeated the Amalekites from Havilah to Shur, but selective obedience proved as problematic as outright disobedience. Sparing King Agag and the best livestock, Saul returned home
and erected a monument to himself at Carmel before heading to Gilgal. When Samuel arrived, Saul greeted him warmly. "The Lord bless you. I have carried out the Lord's instructions." "Then what is this bleating of sheep in my ears?" Samuel asked. "What is this lowing of cattle that I hear?" Saul explained they had saved the best animals to sacrifice to God. But Samuel cut through the excuses. "Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings as much as in obedience? To obey is better than sacrifice. To heed is better than the fat of rams." In the gathering dusk, Samuel delivered the Lord's judgment. "Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king." When Saul grabbed Samuel's robe as he turned to leave, the garment tore, a visual metaphor for the kingdom being torn from Saul's grasp. Despite Saul's pleas, something had broken that couldn't easily be mended. Samuel did agree to honor Saul before the elders by worshipping together. Then, in a final act of judgment, Samuel himself executed King Agag, completing what Saul had left undone. As night fell over Ramah, Samuel returned to his home, grieving for what might have been. The text tells us, Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death, but Samuel mourned for Saul. The relationship between prophet and king, which had begun with such promise, ended in separation and sorrow. Meanwhile, in the palace at Gibeah, Saul continued to reign, but an unsettled spirit troubled him. The man who had once prophesied with divine inspiration now found himself abandoned by that same spirit. In its place came periods of dark depression and volatile anger, hints of the tragedy still unfolding. The kingdom remained, the battles continued, but its first king had fallen from favor. Elsewhere in Israel, unknown to Saul, wheels were already turning that would bring forth his successor, not from the palaces of power, but from the quiet pastures of Bethlehem, the shepherd boy.
In Bethlehem, a town nestled among the Judean hills, lived a man named Jesse with his 8 sons. The family tended flocks on the surrounding slopes, where, generations before, their ancestress Ruth had gleaned in the fields of Boaz. Simple and hard-working, they lived far from the royal court at Gibeah, unaware that heaven's eye had turned their way. Samuel, still mourning Saul's failure, heard the Lord's gentle rebuke. "How long will you grieve? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem, for I have chosen one of his sons to be king." Fear mingled with Samuel's grief. "How can I go? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me." The king's jealousy of any threat to his throne was well known. Samuel received permission to say he had come to offer sacrifice, concealing his primary mission within a legitimate religious duty. When the prophet arrived at Bethlehem's gate, the town elders trembled. "Do you come in peace?" they asked, wondering if some sin had brought the famous prophet to their doorstep. Samuel assured them he came peacefully to offer sacrifice and invited Jesse's family to join him. As sheep bleated in nearby pens and the sacrifice was prepared, Samuel studied Jesse's sons. First came Eliab, tall and impressive, so much like Saul in appearance that Samuel thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here." But the gentle voice that had guided Samuel throughout his life whispered, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him." The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. One by one, 7 sons of Jesse passed before Samuel: Abinadab, then Shammah, then 4 more, whose names the Bible doesn't record. To each Samuel shook his head. Puzzled, he asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" "There is still the youngest," Jesse replied, perhaps embarrassed to have forgotten him. He is tending the sheep. Samuel would not proceed until this last son arrived. A messenger was sent to the fields, and soon footsteps approached, not the heavy tread of a warrior, but the light step of a youth. David entered, his face weathered from outdoor life, yet still bearing the softness of adolescence. His eyes were bright and clear, his manner respectful but not intimidated by the famous prophet. Perhaps he carried his shepherd's staff, or a small harp strapped to his back, tools of his twin callings. This youngest son had spent countless days with the sheep, protecting them from lions and bears, leading them to green pastures and still waters. During long afternoon watches, he had composed songs that rose from the hills to heaven, psalms of praise for the Creator whose handiwork surrounded him. Something in Samuel's heart leaped in recognition. This was the one. The Lord's command came clear, "Rise and anoint him." This is he. As family members watched in astonishment, Samuel took the horn of oil and poured it over David's head. The fragrant liquid ran down his hair and beard, a physical symbol of a spiritual reality. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day on, the scriptures tell us. What thoughts raced through the young shepherd's mind as oil dripped from his chin? Did he understand what this strange anointing meant? Did visions of kingship flash before him? Or did he simply accept it as another mystery in a life already attuned to divine whispers? The text doesn't tell us what explanation Samuel offered, what words passed between them. Perhaps the full meaning was kept hidden for David's protection. To openly proclaim him as the future king would mark him for death in Saul's increasingly paranoid court. Samuel returned to Ramah, his mission completed, yet its outcome uncertain. How would this anointed shepherd boy come to the throne? When would Saul's reign end? These questions remained unanswered as he journeyed home through the hill country, the horn that had carried the anointing oil now empty at his side. David returned to his sheep in the fields of Bethlehem. Outwardly, nothing had changed. The same sun warmed his face, the same stars guided his night watches. Yet inwardly, everything was different. The spirit that had departed from Saul now rested on David, preparing him through daily faithfulness for responsibilities he could barely imagine. In the palace at Gibeah, Saul continued his troubled reign, unaware that his successor had been chosen. The king who had once hidden among the baggage now jealously guarded his throne, while the true king-to-be humbly tended sheep, learning leadership lessons that no royal court could teach. These two lives, Saul's and David's, would soon intersect in ways neither could foresee. The threads of their destinies were being woven together by hands beyond their understanding, creating a tapestry whose full pattern would only become clear with time. As evening shadows lengthened across Bethlehem's hills, David gathered his flock for the night, perhaps singing softly to calm both them and himself. "The Lord is my shepherd," he may have whispered, finding in his own care for these animals a reflection of how heaven watched over him. In the quiet hills of Bethlehem, young David tended his father's sheep with watchful eyes and a gentle heart. Days passed in peaceful rhythm as he protected the flock from wolves and bears that might threaten their safety. During these long hours under open skies, David taught himself to play the harp, filling the wilderness with melodies that seemed to flow directly from his soul. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, all was not well. King Saul, once strong and confident, found himself plagued by a troubled spirit. Dark moods descended without warning, leaving the king agitated and unable to find peace. His servants watched with growing concern as their leader became increasingly unpredictable. These episodes cast shadows over the entire court,
turning what was once a place of celebration into one of whispered fears. "My lord," suggested one of Saul's trusted advisors after witnessing a particularly difficult day, "perhaps music might soothe your spirit when these troubles come upon you. Let us find someone skilled with the harp whose playing might bring you relief." Saul nodded weakly, willing to try anything that might quiet the storm within him. "Find me such a person," he commanded. Word spread throughout the kingdom that the king sought a musician. Among Saul's servants was one who had heard of Jesse's youngest son. "I know of a son of Jesse from Bethlehem," he told the king. "He plays the harp with rare gift, and beyond this he is brave and speaks well. The Lord seems to be with him in all he does." Intrigued by this description, Saul sent messengers to Jesse with an urgent request. "Send me your son David, who tends the sheep." When Jesse received the king's command, he prepared a gift, bread, wine, and a young goat, and sent David to Saul's court. The journey from Bethlehem to Gibeah, where Saul resided, wasn't long, but for David it marked the beginning of a path that would forever change his life. David entered the palace with quiet confidence, carrying his simple wooden harp. The contrast between the shepherd boy and the royal setting couldn't have been more striking. Yet something in his manner, perhaps the calm in his eyes or the steadiness of his step, spoke of unusual character. Saul looked up as David was presented to him, studying this youth who had been described in such glowing terms. There was nothing remarkable in his appearance, just a handsome young man with ruddy cheeks and bright eyes. But when David began to play, everything changed. His fingers moved across the strings with practiced ease, drawing forth sounds that seemed to carry healing within their notes. The music filled the chamber, washing over Saul like cool water on fevered skin. The troubled expression that had marked the king's face gradually softened and his clenched hands relaxed. Those present watched in amazement as the king's demeanor transformed. The dark spirit that had tormented him retreated before the simple beauty of David's melodies. For the first time in many days, Saul smiled. "This boy will stay," Saul declared when the music finally ceased. "I want him near whenever the darkness comes." So David entered the service of the king, standing ready to play whenever Saul's spirit was troubled. He quickly earned Saul's affection, eventually becoming his armor-bearer, a position of trust and honor. Jesse received word that his youngest son would not be returning to the sheep, but would remain in the royal court. In the palace, David observed and learned. He watched how the kingdom was governed, how soldiers trained, how diplomacy worked. Though still a youth, his mind absorbed everything around him. All the while, unknown to everyone, including David himself, the Spirit of the Lord was preparing him for a future role none could have imagined. Saul grew fond of David, finding not only relief in his music but also enjoying his thoughtful conversation and humble manner. He sent a message to Jesse: "Allow David to remain in my service, for I am pleased with him." When the dark moods descended on Saul, David would take up his harp. As the music filled the room, those watching could see the tension leave the king's body, the troubled lines on his face smoothing away. It seemed almost magical how the simple strings could drive away what no physician or counselor could touch. What no one recognized in these quiet moments was that two futures were unfolding side by side. One king whose reign was already marked for ending by divine decree found temporary peace, and beside him stood the shepherd musician already anointed in secret, whose kingdom would endure for generations to come.
The peaceful rhythm of palace life was suddenly disrupted when reports arrived of Philistine forces gathering at the border. These ancient enemies of Israel had assembled a mighty army in the valley of Elah, challenging Saul's forces to battle. King Saul, roused from his melancholy by the threat of war, gathered Israel's fighting men and marched to meet this challenge. The two armies faced each other across the valley, each occupying a mountain on either side, with the brook of Elah flowing between them. Days passed in tense standoff, neither side willing to surrender the advantage of their high ground by crossing the valley first. Then, one morning, a singular figure emerged from the Philistine camp. Even from a distance, his immense size was apparent. This was Goliath of Gath, a warrior of legendary proportions, standing over 9 feet tall. His bronze armor gleamed in the morning sun, and his spear was like a weaver's beam. The very ground seemed to tremble with each step he took. Goliath's voice boomed across the valley. "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he can fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants." This challenge struck fear into the hearts of Saul and all the Israelites. Not a single warrior stepped forward to accept the giant's challenge. Morning and evening for 40 days, Goliath came forth with his taunting offer, and each time Israel's army trembled. It was during this time that David arrived at the camp, sent by his father Jesse to bring food to his 3 older brothers who served in Saul's army. As he reached the battlefield, the soldiers were moving into their battle positions, shouting the war cry, excited to see his brothers. David left his supplies with the keeper of baggage and ran to the battle line. While David was speaking with his brothers, Goliath stepped forward with his usual challenge. David watched as the Israelite soldiers fled from the giant, and he heard them discussing the king's offer. Whoever killed the Philistine would receive great riches, the king's daughter in marriage, and tax exemption for his family. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? David asked, surprised by the fear he witnessed. His eldest brother Eliab heard this question and grew angry with David. "Why have you come down here? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the evil of your heart. You came down just to watch the battle." But David's words spread through the camp until they reached Saul, who summoned the young man to his tent. Standing before the king, David spoke with surprising confidence. "Let no one's heart fail because of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul looked doubtfully at the youth before him. "You cannot go against this Philistine to fight with him. You are just a boy, and he has been a warrior since his youth." David replied with quiet certainty, telling Saul how he had protected his father's sheep from lions and bears. "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Something in David's confidence moved Saul. Perhaps it reminded him of his own early days, when faith had guided his actions. "Go then," he said at last, "and may the Lord be with you." Saul offered David his own armor, a bronze helmet, a coat of mail, and his sword. David tried them on, but found he could not move freely. "I cannot go with these," he said, "for I am not used to them." Instead he took only his staff, his sling, and 5 smooth stones from the brook. As David approached Goliath, the giant looked upon the youth with disdain. "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" he roared. "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field." David stood his ground unwavering before the massive warrior. His reply rang clear across the valley. "You come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head." With these words, David ran toward Goliath. As he ran, he placed a stone in his sling and whirled it above his head. With practiced skill honed through years of protecting his sheep, he released the stone, which flew straight and true, striking Goliath in the forehead. The giant fell face down on the earth. The valley fell silent as the massive form of Goliath collapsed to the ground. For a moment, neither army moved, both stunned by the sight of the champion felled by a shepherd boy with nothing but a sling and stone. David approached the fallen giant, and since he had no sword of his own, he drew Goliath's weapon from its sheath. With the Philistine's own sword, he cut off the giant's head, confirming his victory beyond any doubt. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, panic spread through their ranks. The men of Israel and Judah raised a battle cry and pursued the fleeing Philistines all the way to the gates of Ekron. The road to Shaaraim was strewn with the fallen as the Israelites drove their enemies from the land. David, still holding the head of Goliath, was brought before Saul by Abner, the commander of the army. The king looked at the young man with new eyes, scarcely able to believe what he had witnessed. "Whose son are you, young man?" Saul asked, his voice filled with wonder. "I am the son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite," David replied. News of the victory spread rapidly throughout Israel. As Saul and his army returned home, women came out from all the towns singing and dancing with tambourines and three-stringed instruments. Their joyful song echoed through the streets. "Saul has struck down his thousands and David his 10,000s. This simple verse, born of celebration, planted a seed of jealousy in Saul's heart. The king had been praised for thousands, but this youth, this shepherd boy, was credited with tens of thousands. From that day forward, Saul viewed David with suspicion. The morning after the celebration, David was summoned to play the harp as usual, for Saul's dark mood had returned with greater force. As David played, trying to soothe the troubled king, Saul's hand closed around his spear. Suddenly, with no warning, he hurled it toward David, intending to pin him to the wall. David escaped the king's attack, not once, but twice that day, slipping away before the spear found its mark. Saul recognized that the Lord had left him and was now with David. This realization only deepened his fear and resentment. The king removed David from his presence, making him a commander over 1,000 soldiers, ostensibly a promotion, but in truth, an attempt to distance the young hero, and perhaps even hope for his death in battle. Yet in everything David did, he acted wisely, and succeeded, for the Lord was with him. All Israel and Judah loved David, because he went out and came in before them with humility and courage. Rather than diminishing David's popularity, Saul's actions only increased it. Every challenge the king set before the young warrior became another opportunity for David to demonstrate his skill and wisdom. Seeing that David continued to prosper, Saul devised a new plan. He offered his daughter Merab to David as a wife, saying, "Only be valiant for me, and fight the Lord's battles." In his heart, Saul thought, "Let not my hand be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him." David responded with humility, "Who am I, and who are my relatives, my father's clan in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king?" When the time came for Merab to be given to David, she was given instead to Adriel the Mechalathite as a wife. However, Saul's younger daughter Michal loved David. When this was reported to Saul, he saw another opportunity. "I will give her to him," he thought, "that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him." Saul instructed his servants to tell David privately, "The king desires no bride price, except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged of the king's enemies."
Saul's hope was that David would fall by the hand of the Philistines during such a dangerous mission. But David rose and went with his men, striking down 200 Philistines. He brought their foreskins to the king to become his son-in-law, and Saul gave him Michal as his wife. But seeing how the Lord was with David, and how his daughter loved him, Saul became even more afraid. The king's fear grew into a settled enmity, making him David's enemy continually. Yet, the more Saul opposed him, the more wisely David behaved. His name became highly esteemed throughout Israel, and stories of his courage spread far beyond the kingdom's borders. Young warriors flocked to serve under his command, drawn by his reputation for both bravery and wisdom. Unlike many who gained sudden fame, David maintained his humility, giving credit to God for his victories, and treating his men with respect and fairness.
In the territory of Benjamin lived a man named Kish, wealthy and respected among his tribe. His son Saul stood head and shoulders above other men, handsome, strong, and imposing. Yet destiny found him on a humble errand, searching for his father's lost donkeys. After 3 days of fruitless searching, Saul and his servant approached the town where Samuel was staying. "Let's ask the seer," suggested the servant, offering the last quarter shekel of silver as payment for the prophet's help. As they climbed toward the town gate, they met women coming to draw water who directed them to the high place where Samuel would bless the sacrifice. What Saul didn't know was that the day before God had whispered to Samuel, "About this time tomorrow, I will send you a man from Benjamin, anoint him leader over my people Israel." Now seeing the tall young man approaching, Samuel heard the inner voice again. "This is the one." Before Saul could even ask about missing donkeys, Samuel invited him to eat in the place of honor at the feast, where a special portion had been set aside, as if expecting him. Confused but pleased, Saul accepted. "Am I not a Benjamite from the smallest tribe? Why such honor?" he wondered. As evening fell, they talked on the rooftop under a canopy of stars. What passed between them, the scriptures don't say, but morning found Samuel walking Saul to the edge of town. Sending the servant ahead, Samuel took a flask of olive oil and poured it over Saul's head. "The Lord has anointed you ruler over his inheritance," he declared. To confirm this unexpected calling, Samuel gave Saul 3 signs that would happen on his journey home: an encounter near Rachel's tomb, an offer of bread at the great tree of Tabor, and a group of prophets coming down from the high place. "The Spirit of the Lord will come powerfully upon you," Samuel said. "You will prophesy and be changed into a different person." Everything happened just as Samuel predicted. When Saul met the prophets, the Spirit came upon him, and he began to prophesy with them. People who knew him were astonished. "Is Saul also among the prophets?" The question became a saying in Israel. Samuel called the people to Mizpah to present their new king. Using the sacred lots, he narrowed down tribe by tribe, clan by clan, until Saul was selected. But when they looked for him, Saul was nowhere to be found. He had hidden himself among the baggage, perhaps overwhelmed by the weight of what was happening. Once found and brought forward, Saul's impressive height caused many to shout, "Long live the king!" Samuel explained the rights and duties of kingship, writing them on a scroll placed before the ark. Yet, not everyone celebrated. Some troublemakers muttered, "How can this man save us?" Saul, showing wisdom beyond his years, held his peace. The new king's first test came quickly. Nahash the Ammonite besieged Jabesh Gilead, offering surrender terms that included gouging out the right eye of every man. When messengers brought this news to Gibeah, Saul was returning from the fields behind his oxen. still living as a farmer, despite his anointing. Hearing the people's distress, the Spirit of God came powerfully upon Saul. He cut a pair of oxen into pieces and sent them throughout Israel with this warning: "This is what will be done to the oxen of anyone who does not follow Saul and Samuel." Fear of the Lord fell on the people, and they turned out as one. Gathering a massive force, Saul divided them into 3 groups and attacked the Ammonite camp before dawn. By midday, the enemy was scattered so completely that no 2 soldiers remained together. This decisive victory silenced those who had doubted Saul's ability to lead. At Gilgal, amid celebration and sacrifice, Samuel formally installed Saul as king. "Now, here is the king you have chosen," Samuel told the people. To demonstrate that this change came with heaven's approval, Samuel called on God to send thunder and rain during the dry harvest season. When dark clouds gathered and rain poured down, the people trembled, realizing the significance of what they had done. "Do not be afraid," Samuel assured them. "Serve the Lord faithfully with all your heart. Do not turn away to worthless idols that cannot rescue you. For the sake of his great name, the Lord will not reject his people." So began the reign of Saul, son of Kish, Israel's first king. The simple man who had searched for lost donkeys now led a nation. Early success and the Spirit's power marked these beginning days, like sunrise promising a bright day ahead. Yet shadows lurked beyond the horizon, unseen but approaching. The fall of Saul, disobedience and rejection. For 2 years, Saul ruled Israel with strength and purpose. The Philistine threat remained constant along the western borders, their outposts dotting the highlands. Iron weapons gave them advantage, and they controlled the trade routes, forbidding blacksmiths among the Hebrews, lest they forge weapons of war. Saul built a standing army with his son Jonathan as chief commander. Brave and true-hearted, Jonathan attacked a Philistine outpost at Geba, stirring the hornet's nest. In response, the Philistines gathered a massive force, 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and foot soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. Fear gripped the Israelites. Many hid in caves and thickets. Some fled across the Jordan River. Those who remained with Saul at Gilgal trembled as they waited for Samuel to arrive and offer sacrifices before battle. 7 days passed the appointed time, but Samuel hadn't come. Watching his army dwindle as men slipped away, Saul made a fateful choice. Though not a priest, he offered the burnt offering himself. Just as the flames consumed the sacrifice, Samuel arrived, his face clouded with disappointment. "What have you done?" the prophet asked. Saul explained his reasoning: the army scattering, the Philistines gathering at Michmash, the fear that battle would begin before seeking God's favor. His words made earthly sense but missed a deeper truth. Samuel's response fell like stones. "You have acted foolishly. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. The Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time, but now your kingdom will not endure." Despite this rebuke, God granted victory through Jonathan's courage and faith. With just his armor-bearer, the young prince climbed the cliffs to a Philistine outpost, saying, "Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." 20 enemy soldiers fell before them, creating panic in the Philistine camp that spread like wildfire. Seeing the enemy in disarray, Saul led his men into battle. Israelites who had hidden now joined the fight. Victory came, but was tarnished by Saul's rash oath that no one should eat until evening. Unknowing, Jonathan tasted honey from a wild hive, bringing another crisis of Saul's making. This pattern continued through the years, victories granted despite Saul's missteps. The kingdom secured even as cracks appeared in its foundation. Saul fought against Moab,
Ammon, Edom, and the kings of Zobah, pushing back Israel's enemies on every side. His family grew sons Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchishua, daughters Merab and Michal, his wife Ahinoam, watching over their household. Then came the Amalekites, desert raiders, who had attacked Israel during their wilderness journey generations before. Through Samuel, God commanded Saul to completely destroy this people and all their possessions, a harsh judgment by modern standards, yet presented as divine justice for ancient wrongs. Saul gathered his army and defeated the Amalekites from Havilah to Shur, but selective obedience proved as problematic as outright disobedience. Sparing King Agag and the best livestock, Saul returned home and erected a monument to himself at Carmel before heading to Gilgal. When Samuel arrived, Saul greeted him warmly. "The Lord bless you. I have carried out the Lord's instructions." "Then what is this bleating of sheep in my ears?" Samuel asked. "What is this lowing of cattle that I hear?" Saul explained they had saved the best animals to sacrifice to God. But Samuel cut through the excuses. "Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings as much as in obedience? To obey is better than sacrifice. To heed is better than the fat of rams." In the gathering dusk, Samuel delivered the Lord's judgment. "Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king." When Saul grabbed Samuel's robe as he turned to leave, the garment tore, a visual metaphor for the kingdom being torn from Saul's grasp. Despite Saul's pleas, something had broken that couldn't easily be mended. Samuel did agree to honor Saul before the elders by worshiping together. Then, in a final act of judgment, Samuel himself executed King Agag, completing what Saul had left undone. As night fell over Ramah, Samuel returned to his home, grieving for what might have been. The text tells us, Samuel did not see Saul again until the day of his death, but Samuel mourned for Saul. The relationship between prophet and king, which had begun with such promise, ended in separation and sorrow. Meanwhile, in the palace at Gibeah, Saul continued to reign, but an unsettled spirit troubled him. The man who had once prophesied with divine inspiration now found himself abandoned by that same spirit. In its place came periods of dark depression and volatile anger, hints of the tragedy still unfolding. The kingdom remained, the battles continued, but its first king had fallen from favor. Elsewhere in Israel, unknown to Saul, wheels were already turning that would bring forth his successor, not from the palaces of power, but from the quiet pastures of Bethlehem, the shepherd boy.
With Jonathan's warning confirming Saul's murderous intentions, David's life as a fugitive began in earnest. No longer could he return to his home, his wife, or his position in the royal court. The man who had been Israel's champion now fled like a hunted animal, never knowing where he might find safety or when the king's men might catch up with him. David's first stop was Nob, where the tabernacle of God stood. There he sought help from Ahimelech the priest, who was alarmed to see the king's son-in-law traveling alone. "Why are you alone, and no one with you?" the priest asked, his voice betraying his concern. David resorted to deception, explaining that he was on a secret mission for the king. "The king has charged me with a matter, and said to me, 'Let no one know anything of the matter about which I send you, hungry and unarmed.'" David asked Ahimelech for provisions and weapons. The priest had nothing to offer except the consecrated bread, the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord, to be replaced by hot bread. Normally, only priests could eat this holy bread, but given the emergency, Ahimelech provided it to David. "Is there not here a spear or a sword at hand?" David then asked, I have brought neither my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste. The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod." Ahimelech replied, "If you will take that, take it, for there is none but that here." "There is none like that," David said. "Give it to me." Thus, armed with Goliath's sword, a fitting symbol of his greatest triumph, David continued his flight. Unknown to David, his visit to Nob had not gone unwitnessed. Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief herdsman, was there that day and observed the interaction between David and the priest. From Nob, David fled to Gath, a Philistine city, where he sought refuge with King Achish. This was a desperate move, seeking safety among his former enemies. When the servants of Achish recognized him, saying, "Is not this David the king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. David became afraid and pretended to be insane, scratching on the doors and letting spittle run down his beard. "Look, you see the man is mad," Achish said to his servants. "Why then have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen that you have brought this fellow to behave as a madman in my presence?" Thanks to this ruse, David escaped from Gath. He found refuge in the cave of Adullam, where his family soon joined him after hearing of his location. Others gathered to him as well, everyone who was in distress, in debt, or bitter in soul. About 400 men joined him there, and he became their leader. Concerned for his parents' safety, David took them to Mizpeh of Moab, and asked the king of Moab, "Please let my father and my mother stay with you till I know what God will do for me." They remained under the protection of the king of Moab, while David moved to the stronghold in the wilderness. The prophet Gad advised David, "Do not remain in the stronghold. Depart and go into the land of Judah." So David departed and went into the forest of Hereth. Meanwhile, King Saul heard that David had been discovered. Seated under the tamarisk tree on the height at Gibeah with his spear in hand, and surrounded by his servants, Saul lamented, "Hear now, you Benjaminites. Will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds, that all of you have conspired against me? No one discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is sorry for me, or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me, to lie in wait, as at this day." At this moment, Doeg the Edomite spoke up. "I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech the son of Ahitub, who inquired of the Lord for him and gave him provisions, and the sword of Goliath the Philistine." Enraged, Saul summoned Ahimelech and all the priests of Nob. When they arrived, Saul confronted Ahimelech. "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you have given him bread and a sword, and have inquired of God for him, so that he has risen against me, to lie in wait, as at this day?" Ahimelech defended himself. "Who among all your servants is so faithful as David, who is the king's son-in-law, and captain over your bodyguard, and honored in your house? Is today the first time that I have inquired of God for him? No, let not the king impute anything to his servant, or to all the house of my father. For your servant has known nothing of all this, much or little." But Saul's mind was made up. "You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house," he declared, and ordered his guard to kill the priests of the Lord. But Saul's servants refused to raise their hands against the priests of the Lord. Then the king turned to Doeg the Edomite. You turn and strike the priests." Without hesitation, Doeg struck down 85 men who wore the linen ephod. He put to the sword Nob, the city of the priests, its men and women, children and infants, oxen, donkeys and sheep. Only one son of Ahimelech, Abiathar, escaped. He fled to David, bringing news of the massacre. David was stricken with grief and guilt. "I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, 'I have occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house. Stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life, seeks your life. With me you shall be in safe keeping.'" From then on, Abiathar remained with David, bringing with him the ephod, the means of seeking the Lord's guidance. David and his band became fugitives, moving from place to place, hiding in the wilderness of Ziph, the strongholds of En-gedi, and the hills of the Judean desert. Everywhere, Saul hunted him as one hunts a partridge in the mountains. Yet, David's numbers grew, as the desperate and discontented flocked to him, and his reputation as a leader, a warrior, and a man of faith spread across Israel. There were moments of both mercy and temptation on this journey. Once, Saul pursued David into the wilderness of En-gedi, where David and his men hid deep in a cave. Unaware, Saul entered the same cave to relieve himself. David's men whispered, "Here is the day of which the Lord said, 'Behold, I will give your enemy into your hand.'" But David only crept forward and quietly cut off a corner of Saul's robe. His conscience struck him for even this symbolic act of rebellion. "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put out my hand against him." When Saul left the cave, David called after him, bowing low and showing the piece of robe. "See, my father, the corner of your robe in my hand. I have not sinned against you, though you hunt my life to take it." Saul wept aloud. "You are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand. Swear to me, therefore, that you will not cut off my descendants after me." David gave his oath, and Saul returned home, but David and his men remained in the strongholds, knowing Saul's moods could quickly turn. David's years in exile were marked by moments of danger, cunning, and deep reliance on God. He rescued the town of Keilah from Philistine attack, only to learn Saul would soon besiege it. Using the ephod, David sought the Lord's guidance and fled before Saul arrived. The people of Ziph betrayed David's hiding place, and only a sudden Philistine raid pulled Saul away. Again Saul pursued David to the wilderness of Ziph. By night, David and Abishai crept into Saul's camp as his men slept. David could have ended the king's life, as he lay vulnerable, but he took only Saul's spear and water jug. At a safe distance, David called to Saul and Abner, the commander, "Where is the king's spear? Why did you not guard your lord the king?" Saul again acknowledged David's righteousness and his own folly. Yet, David knew he could not trust Saul's repentance. The refuge with the Philistines. At last, David sought refuge with Israel's old enemies, the Philistines. King Achish of Gath granted him and his men the town of Ziklag. For over a year, David lived there, conducting raids against Israel's enemies, but maintaining the trust of Achish by keeping his true actions hidden. During this time, David's household grew. He now had 2 wives, Ahinoam and Abigail, the wise widow from Carmel, whose quick action had once spared her former husband and their household from David's anger. Meanwhile, Saul's fate grew darker.
the Philistines massed for war against Israel. Saul, desperate and abandoned by God, sought answers from the witch of Endor, hoping for guidance from the dead prophet Samuel. But Samuel's spirit declared the end of Saul's reign. "Tomorrow you and your sons shall be with me, and the Lord will give the army of Israel into the hand of the Philistines." As the Philistine army advanced, Achish wanted David and his men to march with him, but the Philistine commanders, distrusting David's loyalty, sent him back to Ziklag. When David returned, he found the town burned and their families carried off by Amalekite raiders. In bitter anguish, his men spoke of stoning him, but David found strength in the Lord. He sought God's direction, pursued the Amalekites, and recovered all that had been taken. The death of Saul. The Philistines defeated Israel's army on Mount Gilboa. Saul's sons, including the beloved Jonathan, were slain. Wounded and surrounded, Saul fell on his own sword rather than be captured. The news reached David in Ziklag with a deep wave of grief and lament. "How the mighty have fallen." David mourned Jonathan. "Your love to me was wonderful, surpassing the love of women." With Saul dead, the way was open for David's rise. He did not seize power by force. Instead, he inquired of the Lord and was anointed king over Judah, reigning from Hebron. The house of Saul continued for a time in the north, under Ishbosheth, but after years of conflict, David was accepted as king by all the tribes of Israel.
David established Jerusalem as his capital, bringing the Ark of the Covenant there with music, sacrifice, and celebration. His reign brought Israel to new heights, defeating enemies, expanding the borders, and uniting the tribes. David longed to build a temple for the Lord, but God told him it would be his son who would accomplish this. Yet, David's reign was also marked by personal failures and sorrow. The story of Bathsheba and Uriah stands as a somber warning. When David took Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite, and arranged Uriah's death in battle to cover the sin, the prophet Nathan confronted him. "You are the man," Nathan declared. Pronouncing God's judgment, violence and tragedy would arise within David's own house. David's repentance was deep and sincere, as captured in the Psalms. "Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love." Psalm 51. But the consequences could not be undone. The child born of the affair died. Later, turmoil erupted among David's sons, Amnon, Absalom, and Adonijah, all of which brought heartbreak and conflict. Absalom's rebellion nearly cost David his kingdom and his life. When Absalom was slain, David's grief was overwhelming. "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I had died instead of you." Legacy, the last days, and the promise. In his final days, David prepared for the temple, charged Solomon with building it, and spoke words of wisdom to his son and the people. His life was a tapestry of faith, courage, failure, repentance, and grace. David's psalms, born of both triumph and brokenness, became prayers for generations. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." His legacy lived on not just in Israel's throne, but in the line of the Messiah, as God had promised. "Your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me." As David lay dying, surrounded by his family, his reign ended, but his story continued, echoing through the ages as a testament to the heights and depths of the human soul, the power of forgiveness, and the enduring faithfulness of God. May his story, from shepherd to king, from fugitive to psalmist, carry you into a peaceful rest tonight and remind you always that even in our deepest failings, we can be truly loved and truly redeemed. As David's days drew to a close, the king who had once slain giants and composed psalms from the hills of Bethlehem was now an old man, his body frail, but his spirit still marked by faith. In his chambers, surrounded by loyal attendants and family, David reflected on a life of battles, blessings, and the mercy of God. Before his death, David summoned Solomon, the son chosen to inherit the throne, and the immense task of leading Israel into a new era. David spoke with the candor of a father and the solemnity of a prophet. I am about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong and show yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes, his commandments, his rules, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do, and wherever you turn. If your sons pay close attention to their way, to walk before me in faithfulness with all their heart, and with all their soul, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. He gave Solomon careful instructions about building the temple, about dealing with old enemies and allies, and about honoring the Lord above all. David's parting wisdom was shaped by the lessons of a life marked by both greatness and regret. The Spirit of the Lord speaks by me. His word is on my tongue. The God of Israel has spoken. The Rock of Israel has said to me, when one rules justly over men, ruling in the fear of God, he dawns on them like the morning light. David's reign ended after 40 years, 7 in Hebron over Judah, 33 in Jerusalem over all Israel. He was buried in the city of David, and Solomon his son reigned in his place. Solomon's ascension, and the promise fulfilled under Solomon, Israel reached a golden age. The temple was built, fulfilling David's dream. Wisdom, wealth, and peace flourished for a time. Yet even Solomon's story echoed the warnings of David's life, the consequences of pride, and the importance of remaining faithful to God. But the truest fulfillment of God's promise to David lay in the centuries to come. From David's lineage, the prophets foretold, would come a king whose reign would never end. Generations later, in Bethlehem, the same city where David tended sheep, a child would be born of David's house. He would be called Jesus, Messiah, the Son of God, the Shepherd King. Legacy, the Psalms, and the eternal kingdom. David's legacy is not only found in his victories or even his throne, but in the enduring words of the Psalms, prayers of trust, repentance, anguish, and praise. His songs have comforted kings and shepherds, prophets and prisoners, ordinary people seeking God through all the ages. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. From the fields of Bethlehem to the courts of Jerusalem, from exile to restoration, from failure to forgiveness, David's life stands as a testament to the truth that God chooses, restores, and uses even the most unlikely people to accomplish his purposes. It is a story of courage, of humility, of confession and restoration, a story that invites every listener, every reader, to trust that no matter how far they have wandered, God's love and promise can reach them. So as you rest tonight, remember the story of David, the shepherd boy who became a king, the psalmist whose words still echo, and the ancestor of the one who is called the Son of David, Savior of the world. May the peace and hope of his story settle over you, guiding your heart through the darkness, reminding you that God weaves every thread, joy, pain, triumph, and regret, into a tapestry of redemption and grace. Good night,
and may you sleep in the assurance of a love that never fails.